Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Lydia, the Fun Finance Queen, your money mentor online. Today, what I want to talk about is what would you do if you are a millionaire? Let's say I come into millions. What would I do? Well, I'll tell you what I did. I had a quick conversation with my nieces, nephews, sons, daughters, and asked them, what would you do if you had £1 million hit your account today? Well, I got some really interesting answers. But before we start that, I want to tell you about a new segment that we've added to our show. So before the video ends, look out for Money Matters segment. And this is where I quickly show you a couple of tips, or maybe one interesting tip that will help you save money and that will help you grow your income and your savings. So look out for that before the end. Stay tuned until the end of the video for that. So back to our topic of choice. What would you do if you had £1 million drop in your account today? Well, from my unbiased interviews that I did with my nieces, nephews, and children, I asked them, what would you do? So I had some really interesting answers. So one of them said, I'll give it to you to look after. The other one said, I'll ask you to tell me how to multiply it. Good one there. Good job, Josh. And the other, so I got some really interesting answers there. And, we all talked about the fact that we'd like to buy a house, or they would like to buy a car, or new clothes, or vintage clothes, they said, or shoes and sneakers and jewelry. Lots and lots of ideas. So I sat there and I thought about this, and I'm like, some of these kids are learning it, some of them are not. But I think it was a great question to ask because it got them thinking. And the reason why I like to ask this question is because if something comes into your hand and you're not prepared for it on a serious note, you're not going to know what to do with it. There's a saying that if the intention of something is not known, or if the purpose of something is not known, abuse is inevitable. If you don't know what that 1 million is there for, you're going to abuse it and you will lose it, and you'll probably end up broke all over again. Think of lottery millionaires. So many of them win millions and millions of pounds. And then 5 years later, we hear that they're completely broke. How does that happen? They didn't know the purpose of the money that came into their hands, so abuse was inevitable. So stop, take a moment, think about it. If you had money come into your hands that you didn't plan for, what would you do with it? I'll tell you what I would do with my million, because I think it's important for us to pay attention to these things and to think things through so that when things happen, we know what to do. Go back to the past videos that I've showed you. Take a look at them, how I've showed you how to apportion money, how I've showed you how to track your expenses. This is an important part of handling your money, whether you have a little amount or a large amount. The reality is, if you can't handle the money that comes into your hands today, if you get £1 million, you're going to handle it the exact same way. So let's take a look at what would make sense to do if you had £1 million come into your account today. So if £1 million came into my hands, here's what I would do with it. I would start by thinking like a rich person. You have to be able to expand your capacity to understand how money works. Take that abundant mindset that I talked about. I'll link it for you at the end of the video. But guys, the abundance mindset is what will help you grow that money instead of blow that money. Okay? So think like a rich person. Key questions, right? What I would ask myself: how can I multiply that money? How can I multiply that money? Yeah, that would be the first question I would ask. The next question I would ask is, what can I do so that I never have to work for someone else again? I'm not saying I'll never have to work. £1 million will not do that for you, friends. But if you think about how you can work for yourself and grow that money, don't create a job, create something that will grow your money. Okay? I would do that. The next thing I would ask myself is, what investments can I make that would bring the best returns? So here I'm changing my mindset. I'm not thinking that I'm going to go buy some sneakers. I'm not going to go buy, some shoes or some jewelry, because those don't add money to my pocket. Think about what is going to add money to your pocket rather than take away. Okay? One of the things that we all said when I asked this question was, we'd give money to our families. Well, we can definitely give money to our family, but rather than give someone a fish, how about we teach them to fish? How about we teach our family to invest? How about we teach our friends to grow our income in such a way that we're able to ensure growth rather than decline of that £1 million? The next thing that I would do is I would set aside 2 years worth of expenses. The reason why I would do this is because I would need time to be able to ensure that those investments are done correctly. So if I set aside 2 years worth of expenses, that puts me in a place where I have maybe, 70, 80% of the money left. Because once I'm done those 2 years, I want to be able to ensure that the rest of that money is generating baby money. Okay? Richest man in Babylon. Your money is a seed or a child, make it grow. Okay? So I would set aside 2 years worth of expenses, and then I also set aside 1 year of an emergency fund. So that gives me 3 years in total to make my investments successful. So at that point, there's no rush. I'm not going to hand over my money to a financial advisor. I will take the time in those 3 years to ensure that I learn how to manage my money myself. So in other videos, I've talked about investing in yourself. Invest in your financial education. This is so important. I can't tell you enough. Take the time to think, take the time to understand money, because if you don't, be intentional about how you grow your money, it will not grow. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't stress that enough. We have to be intentional about getting to a place of financial independence, financial freedom, and financial growth. It won't just happen. Even if £1 million comes into your account, if you haven't been intentional about how you're going to handle that money, it's going to be blown instead of grown. Okay? So I'd set aside the expenses for 2 years, I'd set aside 1 year's worth of emergency fund, and I would investigate on certain areas that I would need to learn how to invest in. I already understand property, it's one of my favorite things. Previous videos, you would have seen that I definitely have always been in the property world. I would start by buying some property. And the goal of that property would be to be as hands-free as possible. It's impossible to make it, completely passive, but I would find properties that require low maintenance and require low levels of hands-on-ness. That's not a word, but I just made it up. So I would probably go for commercial properties. Why? Because commercial leases are very different from residential leases. And the way that they tend to work is that the people who are using your property actually are responsible for maintaining that property. So think about it. If you have a restaurant, the reality is if you don't take good care of that restaurant, clean it, tidy it, paint it, make it how it should be, people won't come in. So commercial leases tend to put the onus on the business person to actually maintain the property, rather than a residential lease, which puts the onus on the landlord instead of the tenant. So a little bit of property nuggets in there. I love property, guys. I will definitely make videos about that in the future. So once I've invested in some property and generated income that would cover my basic expenses, the next thing I'd probably do is I would invest in stocks and shares. Now, this is an area that I'm growing in. I definitely need to learn more about it, but there are so many people who understand this market. And so I would go into those places, invest in myself, like I talked about, educate myself so that I don't hand over my money to a financial advisor who takes commission, and I'm probably not their only client, so they will definitely be busy and not necessarily keeping their eye on my money the way I would. The last thing I wanted to point out, ladies and gentlemen, was that with every investment, time is your friend. Okay? You're not going to put money in somewhere and expect it to bounce out to you tomorrow. That's not how money works. When you make an investment, you have to calculate time and make sure that you have enough time to actually grow that investment. So, for example, property in the UK tends to double in value every 10 years. So, know that if you're putting money into that property, it's not going to generate for you immediately, unless it's like a service accommodation, maybe. But the whole point is that if you leave that money and you're not in a rush to get it back, over time it will grow for you. Okay, it would increase in value because that's what property tends to do. Yes, we've been through crashes. There will always be crashes. That is the nature of the beast. The last crash that I particularly witnessed was when I was living in the United States, and that was 2008, 2009. I saw neighbors to my left, right, and in front of me lose their homes. That, unfortunately, is what happens when there is a crash and you're not prepared for it. But guys, apart from those crashes, Every time there's a crash, there's also a peak. And so we need to make sure that we position ourselves to be in a good place when it comes to property. So time is your friend. Give yourself time. And the same with stocks and the same with shares. So guys, the biggest thing I would walk away with here, if I had a million or if you had a million, I would want you to educate yourself. If you don't educate yourself, friends, you will lose that million very quickly. The goal here is to encourage you to get a financial education. I'm not here to say, go to that particular person or no. Research and learn yourself. This, guys, is the best thing you could do to make sure that when that million comes into your hands, you're ready for it. Okay, so the last thing I promised was that I would talk to you about money matters. So this is our new segment called Money Matters. And I want to take some time to explain to you one money tip every single time that we jump onto Money Matters. So welcome to Money Matters, my friend. Today's tip is about buying cars. So we've talked about the fact that I don't necessarily endorse buying cars through hire purchase or through loans. But if you had to, I want to recommend one thing. Don't go to the car dealership and ask them to buy the car and provide the loan for you. Why? Because whatever loan they have is not necessarily going to be the best on the market. They went with whoever they partnered with best. Okay? You need to figure out who you partner with best and who would give you the best loan. Money matter idea for today is if you decide to go buy a car in a car dealership, go prepared, have a loan in hand so you know exactly how much you're going to spend and you know exactly how much you're going to pay for it before you purchase the car. Never go to a car dealership and take whatever they give you. You have choices, my friend. Make use of them. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. That's the end of our video today. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you on the next one.